So today we are with the legend that is Martin Ucik, trainer, consultant, author of Integral Relationships and Sex Purpose Love, which is actually a manual for men. And God knows we need it, as relationships really seem to be more disposable than ever before. A man who's figured out how to be conscious, awake, and with the ability to understand what requirements, compatibility, and dual purpose of partnerships, and more importantly, how to implement them in relationships, and be a lot more, let's say, aware of how we interact in life. Ken Wilber recognized you as a truly comprehensive and inclusive and leading edge guide. And that's some accolade from one of the world's most modern day philosophical greats. Martin, a big welcome from us. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Anthony. Pleasure to be here.
It's a great pleasure for me. I'm leading an online platform called BU-Evolution. It's about sharing well-being and evolving with an emphasis on sort of cross-propagation. And I think this is really a great a moment for us to be able to share and evolve together. I've always had a personal fascination with relationships and how the mechanism between two people works. And I personally witnessed this kind of repetitious blaming pattern that happens in relationships, just thinking, hoping that something is going to change without any consciousness of really, well, maybe if I just change something slightly, you know, there's hope. But it really is astounding that for me. But now I see that there's, with what you do, there's hope for us all. Now, I've recently enrolled in your course, and I see that it's sort of bite-sized pieces that I can actually implement into my life. So I'm really interested in integral relationship and how it works. So really, where do we begin? Can you start off by telling us about your background, maybe the eureka moment that integral relationship was going to be your vocation in life? You studied with some greats, I mean, Eckhart Tolle, and now you studied as a Power of Now facilitator. You're raised in Germany. You moved to California in the 90s, interested in how you were received and how you, in the new age scene in California. Martin.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with you and to your growing audience, and very excited about the work you do and what you contribute to the evolution of humanity. And relationships are, of course, at least from my perspective, in the center of that. And very quickly, so as you already mentioned, I grew up in Germany and in what I call a happy family. So my parents were happily married for 50 years. I have a brother and a sister. And what I saw as a child was basically men and women being married, men having the traditional gender role as the protector, provider in the what's called the public sphere, and women, mostly 95%, were homemakers raising the children. And so when I was a young adult and met my first wife, obviously I had no other information than replicate this basic gender role. I didn't know anything else. And then when I met my second wife again, I bought a house and a new car, and we had 3 children together. And I ran a business, my wife worked for me. So it was all these traditional roles. In 95, we moved to California to build the American branch of my international soft and hardware distribution company that I ran at the time. And then, so like a key eureka moment was in 2000 when the bass player from the band that I played in, Dan Dorr, gave me a tape from a spiritual teacher that his wife actually liked. And he was completely unknown at the time. And I listened, put the tape into the tape player, into my Walkman, and there was this voice saying, no expectancy, not waiting for anything to happen, just being present in this moment. And as I listened to this tape, that was just like information or somebody almost transmitting something that I had never thought about, never considered, never heard before. And there was this promise for, if I'm just going to be in the now, then I'm going to be happy. And hey, why not, right? So I bought the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and read the book mostly Saturday mornings. It always took a week to contemplate and to integrate. And then he came to San Francisco, and I met him there, talked to him for a while. He's also German like me, and then signed up for a retreat with him 1.5 years later. So it was and joined the Buddhist temple because I didn't even know what the word retreat means. Right? So I didn't want to look stupid going there. I was in near Portland in Oregon, in Brighton Bush, wonderful retreat center in the woods off the grid. And anyway, I went to this retreat with him, and of course I had amazing experiences there. And when I came back, instead of this promise of happiness, I became actually really unhappy with my life, because I realized all of a sudden all the potentials, this not only spiritual connection, but also emotional connection with other people. During the time, I had also joined the Center for Spiritual Living in Santa Rosa and played in the band. And then after I came back from that retreat, I started the Power of Now group. And then a few months later, actually did the official Power of Now group facilitator training. And out of this unhappiness, I started to do therapy, even though Eckhart says we don't really need therapy. We can just watch whatever arises. That didn't seem to work for me, at least. And after 6 months, my therapist convinced me to tell my wife that I want to be loved, that I want to have a deeper connection. And she's a great woman, great mother, great supporter. I owe her a lot, but she matter-of-factly more or less said, or exactly said, well, I no longer love you. If you want to be loved, you have to find someone else. And, we worked out the financial things and the house things and everything very mutually, beneficially. And I felt free, right? I felt now I have opportunity to connect with
They didn't go through this
other
sort of
people.
Depressed stage of it. It kind of like actually it was waiting to happen, and that she pressed the button, that there was a sense of freedom rather than what may have been expected.
Yeah, and I think once she saw that I would continue to provide and allow her to go back to school and get a degree, and so we worked all of this out, and I mean we're still in contact, of course, and I think it was sort of like a release for both of us. Maybe not so great for our children, but it's a different story. But then what happened is, I just thought, didn't know any better. I found another woman who wants to move in with me, and then I'll be as good as I can, the protector and provider. And realized pretty quickly that in Northern California, or in general, times had changed, and this was not nearly enough. What at least the women that I got to know was not nearly enough for what they expected. And the things that they mentioned, that I should be more emotional available and should be in my healthy masculine, and I should know my personality types, and I should do shadow work.
The shoulds,
yeah. And most of them were kind of like well-meaning and supportive. It was not only that they said, oh, I want this from you, they also felt I want this for you, right? So most of the women then said, well, you should read David Data, or I'll take you to this workshop, or you should join this group. And so every time I learned something new, right? Let's say the love languages, or how I can communicate more vulnerably, or be a better lover, and things like that. I thought, oh, the next woman, she will now have the benefit of me learning this. Another big thing was nonviolent communication that had a big impact on how I relate with people. So I was constantly improving, and always thought, oh, that's it, right? And then the next thing came, oh, now, and so there was like all these puzzle pieces laying around of the different things that I learned about relationships. And then in 2006, so that was 6 years after I met Eckhart Tolle and was a student and a facilitator, somebody gave me CDs. So we advanced from tape to CD in the six years, gave me a 10 CD set of Ken Wilber, doing an interview with Tammy Simon from Sounds True called Cosmic Consciousness. And I listened to them on a drive to LA, which is about 8 hours. So I made it almost through all the CDs and was completely blown away. Again, this aha that I had 6 years earlier with Eckhart, but the complexity was like, 10 times, 20 times as big. So as I arrived in LA, I went to a bookstore and bought a book, the only Ken Wilber book they had, Integral Philosophy and Integral Psychology. And that's not the best first book to read if you want to get into Ken Wilber. It was quite bewildering, but I made it through. And about 6 months later, I think I had my second of 3 eurekas, which was simply that if I apply Ken Wilber's integral model to my relationship experiences that I then had, in 4 years of dating, and also what I heard from others. Right? We had a weekly Power of Now group, and whenever we went to the relationship chapter, that took often weeks to get through because people had so much to share. So it was not only my own experiences, but also what I learned in the Center for Spiritual Living. And I went like, wow, this really answers the question that we don't only need all these puzzle pieces, but we also need to see how they fit together. And it's actually not a flat. So like, when you look at a puzzle, it's kind of flat, right? And what Ken Wilber did, it's so like 3-dimensional. There are levels of expression of consciousness, of spiritual development, sexual development, all kinds of developmental lines. So it's not only that couples grow apart like this, right? Or just like moving apart. It's really that couples grow apart where one person is more evolved than the other or evolving quicker than the other. And that was just like, I couldn't believe it. And I mean like, oh, I want to read the Ken Wilber book or the integral book about relationships. And there was no integral relationship book.
Right.
Which completely surprised me.
Then came the pieces of the jigsaw that you've been learning and experiencing, and be able to piece it together. I've read a bit of Ken Wilber actually. I find it, as you say, super intense. With I read one paragraph and then spend 3 weeks thinking about it. Yeah. Whereas with you, I find it like it's really lovely bite-sized pieces of this kind of. You talk about the stages of evolution.
Yeah. And so I went like, well, at the time I had quite a bit of time on my hand, and I was also heartbroken because another woman had just left me and my father had died. And so it was not a great time. And so I wanted to have this book. And so I sometimes jokingly say, it's the book here, a manual for me. Right? Because I wanted to have that. I wanted to have that book. And so then as I talked to other people about it, they said, oh, when it's finished, I also want to get a copy. And I was really surprised when Ken finally got a copy through a friend of his who I had met when he wrote me an email. Right? And the email was in typical Ken Wilber fashion. But the whole thing that the email said was, great book, let's talk, Ken. There was not, dear Martin, thank you, or sorry. It was just like, great book, let's talk, Ken, all in lowercase letters. Wow. I went like, oh God, Ken Wilber wants to talk to me. Oh my God.
Yeah, how did you feel about that? Like slightly
I was crying excited. Actually. And
wow.
And even the little story goes, and other people told me too, before I opened the email, right? It's just an email from Ken Wilber. I didn't even actually open it. I first called my mother and said, oh, Ken Wilber sent me an email. She said, what did he say? I said, I don't know. I haven't opened it yet. I'm so scared, right? Of you maybe saying, how dare you, or bullshit here, or whatever. And so
lucky it didn't go into spam. But you never ever saw it.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's basically the story. And fast forward, then I met a lovely woman in 2012 who wanted to co-create an integral relationship with me and teach together and travel together. And that relationship ended after a year very painfully and very humbly and very embarrassingly for me, right? Not being able to, now I had this wonderful map and still the relationship didn't work. And so I saw some things missing in the book. And also I hadn't really thought through this sharing a purpose. And my book, the first book, is about relationships. I didn't look at love from an integral perspective. And so that prompted me to write my second book that you were kind enough to mention, which is a little thicker, called Sex, Purpose, Love. That's my copy. And so it seems like after every major breakup, I have to write a book. So my friends hope that I won't have another dramatic breakup again, because then the book maybe be like 1,600 pages, jokingly. And so just talking about the third Eureka, since I mentioned the third one, was after I finished the first book in 2010, a few months later, I went to a talk by the now defunct guru Andrew Cohen, who actually became a really good friend over the years. And what I got from him and his students was this idea of evolutionary spirituality and evolutionary purpose. And so I became very interested in what is our life's purpose and how do we share our life purpose in a love relationship, and why does that make sense, and why is that an additional attractor in addition to our biological, and psychological attraction. And so that's why the second book is called Sex, Purpose, Love, because we add the purpose part and the love part to it. So that's, and here we are.
Yeah.
I then did workshops around the world, like 2-week and 3-day and 5-day workshops. I eventually came to Turkey and then broke down these workshops into small, as you mentioned earlier, bite-size 2-hour modules. And then when COVID struck, we could no longer do these things in person. And that's when I created this online course, which now will be a third book. The 400 plus pages training material is basically already a book, and my team and I were working on it right now to make this into the Integral Relationship Practice book. It's the working title right now.
I think the world needs it. I really do. I mean, with disposable, everything is disposable these days, and people, especially with these apps, just scrolling past, and nobody's really, so much superficial stuff. But this is a real chance for us to go deeper and really evolve. I mean, when you talk about evolution in relationships, you've got a step-by-step guide in 14 elements. I mean, can you summarize the 14 elements for us?
Well, I can tell you what they are.
Okay.
So this looks like this. Let's see. I think I have them here, at least with the Turkish names. We also have it in English somewhere.
Right.
And the important thing is that they then come together in the integral relationship model. So the first one is what we call the 4 dimensions of our being. And that's basically what every human can experience in the moment. And we do a little meditation around that, where you have an inner awareness, self, I, consciousness, and you have a physical body. We call it the external physical body that's in which your consciousness lives, or maybe consciousness is even, not only in the brain, but outside. And then there is the collective, what we call culture. Right, our mind, our consciousness doesn't live independently from other people. We learn language and values, and then create the we space. And there's also a social environment. If you look around yourself, there is of course physical stuff that, beginning with clothes and food and air that you breathe, but also the material things that keep your body alive. And these are what Ken Wilber calls the 4 quadrants. And what's interesting is when, there's these 4 dimensions, when we get into an intimate relationship, and only in an intimate relationship, these 4 dimensions get in intimate contact with each other, right? We get to feel ourselves differently when we're in love, and we probably have sex with our partner. So our bodies get in very intimate contact, and we need to exchange what's going on in our inner world, and we also then, most people share their social environment. So you have to deal with issues. When do we sleep, and who's taking out the trash, and what do we have for dinner, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is the foundation, and very fascinating. And then the next element is what we call levels of consciousness development. And the easiest way to understand it is if we think about ourselves, ask ourselves or ask others, what are you mostly concerned about right now in your life, right? Where is your biggest need? Where is your attention? Where is your biggest concern? And we have 8 stages, 8 different levels, and they go from the archaic, that's the pure survival stage, that not many people are in the pure survival stage. But if you have a heart attack or a panic attack, or are severely ill, or are in an accident, your main concern would be your survival, right? Then the next level is basically safety and belonging, and that's a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The survival need, the belonging need. Then the next level is self-actualization, in a way to assert yourself. You have boundaries, to feel empowered, which is in the 3rd chakra. You could kind of, that you can act by your own choices, and are not totally dependent on others. Then the next 4th stage we call the mythic stage, where your main concern is right and wrong living and behavior, right? What's the right thing to do so that our relationships, our societies can function, and what's wrong, and what reward do you get if you do the right thing, and what punishment do you get when you do the wrong thing. And it's not you who decides what's right or wrong, because it's a higher authority that tells you what's the right and wrong thing to do, like a religion or a government or a boss or a spiritual teacher or something like that. And the reward is always in the future, and it's mythical because it emerged thousands of years ago, like the traditional religions, and a lot of beliefs like the sun revolves around the earth, and other typical things, don't hold up to modern scrutiny, including, not only scientifically, but also morally and in other ways. And so the 5th stage we call the rational stage, and it's sort of like the win-lose, but it's also pursuing the good life through objectivity and to connecting with people, not only inside your religion or your particular belief system, but that all humans, deserve to be treated equally in some way, or at least given the same chances. So we get the end of slavery, we get feminism, we get humanistic movement, human rights, etc. on this level. And then the next level we call pluralistic, which questions that a rational mind can objectively perceive reality, and so like come up with moral norms and whatnot. But there is basically, everybody constructs the perception of their reality based on their cultural conditioning. And so we also already see this model, each higher stage becomes more complex than the previous stage. Or as Jürgen Habermas said, each higher stage solves the problems from at the previous level, but creates new problems that increase in complexity. And so the pluralistic stage is very complex, and it not only wants to treat or give everyone the equal opportunity to pursue happiness and success, but also thinks everything should be distributed equally. So they're no longer excluding certain people, and they don't like hierarchies and things like that. But everything is subjective. So we move from objectivity to subjectivity. And then something interesting happens that when the seventh level emerged about 100 years ago, and in full tilt maybe 50 years ago, is that it's the first level that actually sees all these other developmental levels and has an interest in understanding what are the worldviews and the needs and the concerns of people at these previous levels. And while everyone in these previous 6 levels thinks their way of seeing the world is the best and the only right way of looking at the world, which creates all these conflicts, not only in the world, but also in our relationships. The 7th integral level, we call it, it's so like partial or integrated or fragmented and integrated. So, well, humanity and even our brain and our consciousness is sort of like a combination of all these different levels, and everyone is right from their own perspective, right? So a person at level 3 is maybe not as inclusive as a person at 4, 5, 6, but from their particular perspective, right? This is how they see the world. So there's no point in trying to tell them that they should see things differently. It's much better to meet them where they are and prevent them from damaging themselves or imposing their values violently onto others. So there is some moral judgment there, right? You can be egocentric, but you cannot kill other people to get your boundaries respected or something like that. So 7 is the first level that sees that. And then 8th level is, we call the transpersonal, where we realize, you mentioned Ken Wilber writing all these books, and of course me writing all these books, that there is actually a reality that is beyond words. So partially because it hasn't emerged yet. It's a potential that has not emerged yet and not given words. And there is a way of connecting with people that is really very compassionate. So it's not only kind of, I understand where you're coming from, but you also connect with your own suffering and the suffering of others. And you're more interested in the territory, in the lived reality, than in the more theoretical approach of explaining reality. Right? And so sometimes people say, I don't understand what you're saying. And well, this is something that is more felt and more embodied, but you still have the map if you need it, right? So we move basically from objectivity in the 5th stage to subjectivity in the 6th stage to interobjectivity and intersubjectivity in the 7th stage. And then in the 8th stage, you move more into a pure being stage. And so we spent a total of 8 hours in the training just to go step by step through all these stages. And then the next one is about communication, where we practice how people communicate differently with each other at these different levels, because obviously we always hear communication is the most important thing in relationships. And that's true, but it's not a solution if you are at a different level than the person you're communicating with, right? Because then you maybe can understand them, but they cannot understand you because they have not reached that level. And so we practice that. Then now it goes a little faster. Now we have the theoretical framework, and that's for a lot of people a little head spinning. But now we see, how does that now really apply to relationships? And the first one is that we differentiate between biological sex and learned gender roles. So integral means basically to first differentiate parts, right? Tease them apart, not just say man and woman, for example, but say, no, there's a male body, female body, and of course a spectrum in between. And then there are learned gender roles. So that's a differentiation. And that leads us to the next module about avoiding the fear-shame downward spiral, where we realize that females in relationship stress, their primary emotional reaction is fear of not being protected and loved and supported. And the male reaction is actually shame of not being good enough. And often males don't understand the fear response in females, and females don't understand the shame response in males. And then they go down this fear-shame downward spiral. Then we differentiate further, not only the male body and the learned gender roles, and female body learn gender roles, but also what are feminine, masculine polarities, and that they can be embodied by males and females. And there is the healthy feminine and the unhealthy feminine, and the toxic or dark masculine, that this is sometimes called, but also the healthy masculine. And so what we propose in Integral, it comes from Ken Wilber, is it's not just that we need more feminine energy in the world, as we often hear in New Age circles, but we need more healthy feminine and more healthy masculine and less of the unhealthy toxic versions. So we're making that differentiation. Then we have a module on 5 stages of spiritual development. So we're not conflating or confusing consciousness development, what is of ultimate concern to me, or what is my need, with the spiritual awakening, what can I disidentify from and witness, right? And therefore no longer have any attachment or desire or hatred or aversion or wrong thought about things. So that's the spiritual developmental line. And then we have a module on 5 stages of sexual development. It's one of the most popular modules, where we explore the repressed sexuality, the fucking stage, the having sex stage, the making love stage, and the sacred sexuality stage. So again, developmental line with 5 stages, and then something that's not in the integral model, which is the anima animus complex, the repressed or split of males aspects that are in females that get projected onto males, and vice versa, the repressed feminine female aspects in males that get projected onto females. And that goes through 5 stages, from like being dissociated to becoming real equal co-creators. Then we look into personality types, and there are many typologies, obviously, and we use the Enneagram because it's really interesting to look at the compatibilities and incompatibilities that each pairing has in the Enneagram, and also the instinctual variance of the social instinct, the self-preservation instinct, and the sexual/attraction intensity instinct, which has really a big impact on relationships if we don't know what our instinct is and our partner's instinct. Then we do the 5 love languages. That's one of the most popular relationship books and really helpful to know about, but we go a little deeper and also look at the shadow and integration. And so that's a fun module. That leads us to another kind of form of typology, but it's not a real typology, is attachment styles. So that's a very important module for us to explore. And we do tests for the love languages, for Enneagram and attachment style. We do a test in the training. And the attachment styles, the classical 3, are secure, anxious, and avoidant. And then there is a 4th, the anxious avoidant, which is the most difficult to deal with. Then that brings us to a module about the unconscious. Actually, we do have 2 modules on the unconscious, and we have a really nice shadow work process from the book Undefended Love, which we combine with affirmations and healing processes from the Calling in the One and Feminine Power work that Claire Sammet and Catherine Woodward Thomas developed, which I trained in the Calling in the One training. And then we have kind of a unique module, which is personality disorders. And the reason why I have that in there is the more empathetic I became, the more conscious I became, the more I was interested in women who are very complex, right? Interesting, colorful, emotional, sensitive, sexy, right? It's like, and then I attracted women actually who had personality disorders, or actually I didn't really, they were attracted to me because they felt I can be more present with them and understanding and empathetic. And as I became a relationship consultant and trainer, and also talked to, a lot of men specifically, I noticed that they had the same experience, that they became attracted to these highly complex females. And of course, it goes the other way around, that that the more complex females attract complex males, and about, statistically only about 10% of the population have personality disorders, but in the circles where we usually meet people, right, there is about 20 to 30% of people with personality disorders. And I'm not saying we shouldn't date or be in relationship with someone with a personality disorder, but we need to learn first about ourselves. Why are we so attracted to them? Or why am I and others so attracted to them? And how can we have healthy boundaries so eventually we don't break down in these relationships? And then we move into the area of purpose. And around purpose, I differentiate between our biological purpose, which is to survive and to procreate and form groups and cooperate and compete and to see quality of life, and then our transformational purpose, which is to learn, to heal, to grow, and awaken, which is the theme of the integral relationship model. And then a third purpose, and again, not everyone lives all these three purposes. Everybody lives the biological purpose. About 10–15% of the population awakens to their transformational purpose, what you are primarily interested in, and me, right, in this transformation, awakening, evolving. And then there is a third purpose, which I call transcendental purpose, because it transcends the other two purposes, goes beyond. And that's to create more goodness, more truth, more beauty, and or more functionality in the world. In other words, to make the world a better place. And I argue that this is best done together with a partner who shares our purpose, for multiple reasons. First of all, decide at least with one other person what is actually good, what is actually true, what is actually beautiful. So it's not just one person, right? And then also because people can combine their different talents for cognitive intelligence, for empathy, for artistic creativity, and for kinesthetic abilities. And that leads us to looking at love, not only like from the man and the woman, but look at our 7 chakras and how we're actually co-creating relationships through our 7 chakras. So the root, survival, the sacrum sexual, the solar plexus power, the heart chakra, the creativity chakra, the wisdom chakra, and the difference in unity chakra, the ground chakra. And how there is like an exchange between these chakras, if we only live our biological purpose, between chakra 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And that is asymmetric, need-based transactional love, which is a good form of love, as long as this transaction is mutually compatible and beneficial. But if one person falls out of love or no longer loves the other person, meaning they're no longer giving them what they bargained for, then the relationships break down. And then we can make them more symmetrical, aligned, when we share a transformational and specifically our transcendental purpose. So we do something that Wilber hasn't done yet, to integrate the chakras with the levels of consciousness development. So we have a chakra consciousness level matrix, and what are the desires of males and females, or couples, can be same-sex couples too, at the level of each chakra, depending on their level of consciousness. And then we have a module on soulmates. What is the soul? What are soulmates? How can we define them, identify them, and then co-create with them? And again, there are biological soulmates, there are transformational soulmates, and there are transcendental soulmates. It depends a little bit what kind of level of purpose are you at, and of course, what level of consciousness are you at? So there's not only, I mean, maybe at our age, or if you're a little older, there is probably one soulmate that is your soulmate at all these 3 levels, but most people first have like a biological soulmate, and if they get lucky, they have maybe a few biological soulmates, a few transformational soulmates, and then maybe one transcendental soulmate that has all 3. And then in the final module, it's like my pet peeve is, why do relationships matter? And I think a lot of people, an increasing number of people on the planet, just no longer see any value of being in a relationship. It's too difficult to, or there is nobody good enough for me out there. So I rather stay single and keep looking. And that's, of course, everybody's personal choice, including not having children. But I just want to point out one thing. We're the first species in 3.5 billion years of biological evolution that figured out how to have sex without getting pregnant. And we only figured it out reliably and culturally acceptedly about 50 years ago.
Right.
And nobody can tell me that future humans, if they exist, right, will not look back and say, this was a major fulcrum, maybe the major fulcrum in the evolution of humans, that we just, most humans stopped to have way less than 2.5 children on average, which is needed to sustain the human race. And also that we know that people at earlier levels of consciousness development, no judgment, it's actually a good thing, they still have more children than people at higher levels of consciousness development now, right? While in the past it was different, everybody had the same amount of children, more or less, but the people who were at later stages of consciousness development, their children had a much higher chance of survival, right? Because they were agrarians or they had modern medicine and things. While the people at earlier levels of consciousness development, their children, often died before they could reproduce. So this is how we saw evolution, that the more evolved people outnumbered the less evolved people. And now what we're seeing is that the less evolved people have more children than the more evolved people. Again, I'm not judging that. I'm just pointing out that this will have huge impacts on the future of humanity. And so we're looking at 6 different reasons why relationships matter even at higher stages of consciousness development. And that's it. That's all.
Just that nothing. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, what you say is simply amazing. So in the short time that I've been learning with you, there's just light switch going on after light switch and just really absorbing. And I think that you do, not only have you got that experience, but the way you deliver it, as I said earlier, was just in such a lovely, easy way. I find things difficult to learn, and I think the way you deliver it is equally amazing, and I'm grateful. I mean, where do we begin? I mean, I observe the PR campaign in myself. It's like I project the opposite of what I am often, and therefore I'm received as the opposite. So when that kind of is unsustainable and we get revealed, you're with a partner that's thinks that they're with somebody else. I also love what you talked about, and I think there's a whole book in just the narcissist and the empath, which we did the other day, which for me was just like sent shivers down my spine about this kind of idea of, I thought this was a soulmate, but actually it was very toxic. And clearly we had that discussion, and equally I'm just at this early part of the development with you, but something I'd studied earlier is the 5 languages of love, which I'd urge everybody. But I think what you do is really more of a necessity for this day and age for people, and I really urge people to come and join whatever you do. So I've got 2 questions left for you, though I know the time is tight, but one, what do you do outside this for fun? And the second question is, where do people find you? Where can I point people to you? Because I really love what you do, and I'd like to share this to a much broader people, because I think it's so needed.
Yeah. So this is a passion bordering on obsession, right? And also a deep calling. So
no fun outside.
Well, this in itself is fun for me. Yeah. And so everything else I do, I love to cook and go shopping, go to the market, food shopping. And I exercise every day. That's fun. And at night, after the sessions and stuff, I usually watch some German crime movies on the internet. So that's where I empty my mind and get my mind, and I think it has to do with my, since I grew up in Germany and speak German, so watching German movies somehow brings me back to more my past before the integral relationship obsession. And other than that, I don't do much else, and I feel great about that. I'm so happy that I found sort of like another thing that gives meaning to my life, which was playing music in the first 20, 30 years, and then growing my business, and now doing this. And that's all I want to do. So
it's absolutely clear that you love what you do and the way you deliver these classes and resonate with people, and people share. And I think this is so important this day and age, of this kind of connection that we can do with people, and just it really gives that sense. And I think this Zoom thing is one of the good things that came out of this sort of pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next thing is, where can people find you? What's your website? Are you doing any more classes, groups or one-to-ones?
Yeah. So first of all, the website is integralrelationship.com. So singular integralrelationship.com or ucik.com, my last name, ucik.com. And so right now we have the 5th training. We have what we call an interest list for training 6. So we haven't announced it yet, but we're seeing how many people are interested in another Zoom training. Then we have our next 5-day workshop here close to Istanbul from May 14 to 18 next year, 2021. And this is when also training number 5 will be finished the week before. And it's a little late to join training 5, but if somebody sees this in, what's today, October 6th, in the next few days, we can still probably plug you into training 5 or put you on the interest list for training 6. And I also do personal consultations, actually increasingly now. And that's basically the way. And we're also going to have some free events, so you can sign up for our mailing list on integralrelationship.com. We're going to have one coming up on Tantra. A good friend of mine just released the Tantra book that I'm endorsing. And we also have movie nights, which I also think is a real interesting way of understanding all these different elements. We have 26 movies that we're watching, and everyone can join that fit for each of these modules, and we discuss them afterwards. And that's on Tuesday evenings, a lot of fun at 6 p.m. UTC. So we're always working with UTC so everybody can figure out their time zone. So you can also sign up for the movie list and join us for that, where you get an example for each of the 26 modules. We have 26 movies, or you can watch them on your own. So yeah, but that's it. Wait, interest list for new training. We have probably a few times 5-day training workshops. And I'm also going to travel again. I'm going to be in Egypt in December, and then in Hungary early next year probably. And then we have the workshops here in Istanbul. And if you just want to talk with me, you can also do consultation with me online. That's pretty much it.
Fantastic.
And hopefully buy the new book when it comes out, or if you don't want to wait for that, buy one of my existing books.
I am absolutely thrilled that you joined. I'm certainly going to do my bit in terms of promoting you, because it's just, I think it's a phenomenon that's really, really needed. And I just wait for the next class and join the tail end of the last season. So just really trying to grab as much and practice it and implement it. And so I think, as I said earlier, I think what you do is a necessity for everybody. And I urge people to come and find you, seek you, join you. It's an amazing way of really understanding and also connecting, which I think the world needs today. Martin Ucik, I'm delighted. I thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon. And from my heart, thank you so much for joining us.
Likewise, Anthony. Love to you and everyone who's watching. Bye-bye.